Hello BookTube. We're coming to the end of autumn now, and while I've played around with monthly TBRs in the past, I find that sometimes it can really derail my reading and I end up not sticking to any goals that I've set, and I end up getting distracted and reading different things and feeling disheartened because I'm not sticking to my exact plan. So what I would like to do on this channel instead is kind of do a seasonal reading radar where I don't set any specific plans necessarily, but I just share with you once every couple of months the kind of books that are on my mind right now, that are the kind of top of my priorities list as I'm filming, the things that I'm feeling really drawn towards. Not set any specific TBRs or any specific goals necessarily, and keep things very, very loose, very fluid, and I can kind of change my mind. I've got the freedom to pick up other things if something catches my eye and be a little bit looser with my reading plans. So that's what the whole idea behind this sort of reading radar setup is going to be. I have a stack of books next to me that I'm feeling really drawn to reading over the next couple of months when we're getting into the colder, cozier winter season. I'm just going to run through those with you and give you a little idea of the synopsis and the general vibes that I'm kind of getting from those books. As you will know if you've seen any of my previous videos, I'm starting to feel really drawn to fantasy, sci-fi, romance. But having said that, there are some literary fiction books that are still catching my eye at the minute and I'm still feeling drawn to read. I do like to mix things up and not stick too heavily to one specific genre. With that in mind, we're going to start with the literary fiction books that I have, two of which I think are translated. I'm going to start with one of the books that has been haunting my TBR for the longest, and that is Snow by Turkish author Orhan Pamuk, and it is translated by Maureen freely. A few years ago, I set myself a goal with the idea of reading more diversely, to try and read a book by an author from each country in the world, and I have never read anything from Turkey, I don't think. I haven't kept up with that goal amazingly well, so maybe that's something to revisit in the future and make more of a concerted effort to achieving. I picked this up with that in mind, and I feel really drawn to this one for obvious reasons. You can see by the cover and the title that it is obviously a very wintry focused read, but from what I remember about the synopsis of this book is we have a journalist who arrives in a remote Turkish city which has been befallen by a kind of mystery. There is an epidemic of suicides among young women living in this town. There's a lot of division in the town, there's a lot of distrust, and the journalist kind of gets caught up in the centre of unravelling this. Things are growing increasingly tense within this town. There's a lot of cultural division, and then a blizzard cuts the town off from the rest of the world and things start to descend into chaos within the town. So this honestly sounds perfect for this time of year, and I've set this as a reading goal of mine on multiple sort of wintry themed TBRs in the past, and I've never picked it up, and that's a real shame because it does sound like a very intriguing premise, and I've kept it on my TBR, I've never unhauled it, so I am still really interested in picking it up, and I'm hoping that winter 2025-2026 is going to finally be the season that I pick this one up. The next translated book on this little stack is Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri, translated from the Japanese by Giles, and this is another one I've had on my TBR for a little while. I don't think it's necessarily set in winter, but it does revolve around a ghost that I believe haunts Tokyo Ueno Station, and something about ghosts to me just sounds very wintry. Anything to do with death and the afterlife and hauntings, you know, obviously speak to autumn for Halloween, but I also feel like they give me a bit of a wintry vibe as well. Every year there is a themed sort of read along that happens in January in Japan, and this is a Japanese book that has been translated, so I feel like this would be a nice one to pick up in January potentially for that readathon. The author is Korean Japanese, and I think that kind of cultural clash and that kind of outsider status is explored within the book. I think we explore the life and death of a character who haunts Tokyo Ueno Station and unravel his life and how he's ended up where he is today. I don't know, something about this one just gives me kind of wintry vibes. I'm not sure, not necessarily sure why that is, but because of that readathon January in Japan that happens on Instagram, I always feel like Japanese translated books are like perfect for winter. I don't know, that's just the way that it is now stuck in my brain. So this is another one that I'm very excited to pick up. The next one is another much more wintry themed book that I believe is also set in Japan, and that is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au, which I don't think is a translated book, but it is set in Japan. I believe that a mother and daughter reunite in Tokyo on a trip together, and it kind of just follows the trajectory of their relationship and talks about their divisions within their relationship. This is a really nice short little read. I've heard good things about this one, and I have loved everything I've read from Fitzcarraldo, so I was really pleased when I found this in a charity shop a few years ago, but I have not picked it up, and I always, like with Snow, I always save it for winter and then don't get around to it. So I'm hoping that this will be the year that I finally pick this one up. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I don't own. It's a more recent release, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to find a copy of it within the library, and that is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I've heard nothing but great things about this book. I think it is a sort of climate change fiction novel which focuses on a family who are tasked with manning and protecting the seed bank off the coast of Antarctica, or on the coast of Antarctica. In this seed bank, seeds from all different species of plants from around the world are housed in perfect conditions, so that if a plant species ends up going extinct in case of, things like climate change, then they will be able to try and repopulate the world with this species of plant through the seeds that have been protected at the seed bank. Things take a turn for this family when a young woman washes up on the shore near where they're living by the seed bank. I've really enjoyed reading climate fiction over the last couple of years, even though it is a little bit terrifying. And I've heard nothing but great things about this one, so I'm really hoping that I'll be able to pick it up from the library. Hi! I'm really hoping I'll be able to find a copy at the library and check it out. The next book on the stack is more sort of contemporary fiction, and it is one that I've read before and want to revisit, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I read this a few years ago and really loved it. Hi, I'm a bit busy right now. That's it. Just lay down. Just lay down and have a cutch. She's so disruptive every time I film. Fredrik Backman is obviously a very popular and beloved author, and Beartown is a very popular and beloved book, although it is a little bit divisive online, I think. Beartown follows a town in rural Sweden which is caught up every year in kind of ice hockey fever. The town really puts a lot of pressure and dependence on the local ice hockey team, like the high school ice hockey team, to kind of return them to this sense of former glory. Things are not going well for the town generally. Unemployment, I think, is quite high. People are increasingly sort of falling into poverty, and people are moving away for more opportunities elsewhere. So there's a lot of pressure on these young people to perform well in ice hockey championships and to bring back some kind of prestige to the town. This follows a number of different residents of the town after it is revealed that something awful has happened to a young girl at the hands of one of the hockey players. It kind of charts the way in which other people respond to allegations of misconduct by men in positions of power or people who are very popular and very beloved, and the ways in which people deal with that and how they can kind of rationalize these things away. And it was a very powerful read when I read it back in, I think, 2022. However, I have both Us Against You and The Winners, and I haven't read either of them. And I would really love for this winter season to be the time when I finally revisit and finish the Beartown trilogy. I've heard that all of the books in the series are very affecting. I would love to revisit this one to see if I feel the same way as I did when I first read it, because I have seen some criticism of this book since having read it that I think is probably very valid, and I would like to be able to revisit the book with those criticisms in mind to see if I feel similarly or if I still feel the same way that I did when I first read it, and then carry on and finish the series. There's going to be a bit of a theme in this video, which is that I have a lot of series on the go that I would really like to make progress in and finish. The next one being the Saint of Steel series, with the final installment that we currently have published, which is Paladin's Faith. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that for me 2025 has really been the year of Kingfisher. I have been loving reading her fantasy books. This is the final book I have to read in the Saint of Steel series. I recently read the Clocktor War duology because I had heard that if you'd read that duology first, you would get more out of reading Paladin's Faith because you'd have some more background context that is kind of important within this book. I don't know how true that is, but I thought, why not make the reading experience last a bit longer by pausing Saint of Steel and reading Clockwork Boys and the Wonder Engine, which I did and loved both of the books in that duology so much. For anyone that hasn't picked up this series, it's had a bit of a resurgence in popularity, I think, this year after these gorgeous new editions of the covers were released. But this series follows a group of 7 paladins. They are the paladins of the Saint of Steel, who is a god within this world, the world of the White Rat. In a completely unprecedented event, the god that they worship, the Saint of Steel, dies. I think it wasn't even really understood before this that a god could die, but he does. And because followers of certain gods in this world are so inextricably linked to their gods, the paladins that follow this god either go into comas and die, or the trauma causes them to react incredibly violently, and a lot of them go on like killing sprees, or they commit like mass suicide. It's a very dark premise, which is kind of T. Kingfisher's whole vibe, to be honest. She takes these really dark fantasy concepts and injects them with a lot of humour and sweetness at the same time, and it really works for me. I'm not someone who's ever really drawn to like the archetypal cozy fantasy books like Legends and Lattes and things like that. This for me is what I consider cozy. At the start of the book, we are introduced to a group of paladins who have survived this traumatic event. They've been taken in by the Temple of the White Rat, and they are just trying to cope with the trauma of what has happened and rebuild their lives. And each of the paladins, I believe, is going to get a romance novel. And so Paladin's Faith follows Shane, who's one of these paladins, and his relationship with a character that we were introduced to very early on in the series, who I'm very excited is making a reappearance. So I'm really excited to get to this one. I've loved reading this series so much this year. I love it with my whole heart. T. Kingfisher is rapidly becoming a favourite author of mine, and I think rightly so. The next fantasy series that I would love to make progress in this winter, probably not surprising to anyone who saw my previous vlog where I was finishing series, and that is the Broken Earth trilogy. I need to read The Obelisk Gate and The Stone Sky. I read the 5th season earlier this year and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Such an imaginative and creative concept. So for anyone that hasn't read the series or isn't familiar with it, the Broken Earth trilogy follows a futuristic world in which every, few hundred years or so, the world is subjected to what is called a 5th season, which is where basically a cataclysmic climate change-esque event happens. The world is sort of plunged into a nuclear-style winter. There are masses of natural disasters that occur, lots of death and destruction. A group of people have kind of emerged that have a magical ability to kind of control the earth or control natural material. And these people are both incredibly important but also incredibly shunned, and people are very mistrustful of these kind of magic users. We are following in the first book Essen, who at the beginning of a new 5th season, discovers that her husband has killed their son and kidnapped their daughter. And so the book is following her as she sets out on this mission to get her daughter back against the backdrop of this disastrous 5th season that has just begun. That book was so incredibly written. It was so twisty and turny. I was really proud of myself for predicting accurately a twist that occurs later on in the novel. I was really pleased with myself about that one. I read that back in the summer and I haven't picked up the next 2 books yet, and I think it is finally time. I don't want to put it off any longer because I don't want to fall into that trap that I normally do, where I'll read the first book in a series, love it, think it's fantastic, and then not read the rest of the series for years, and then I forget everything, not everything that's happened, but you forget the sort of nitty gritty little details that make a series so rewarding. And you kind of go into the next book and you're like, I've forgotten a lot of the minutiae of this story or this world, and it's really frustrating then to try and get back into it. So as it's been a few months since I read the 5th season, I think I really want to get to these as soon as I can, so that I don't fall back into that trap and forget everything important that happened in the 5th season. Another series that I have been loving recently over the last couple of years and would love to make some more progress in is the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. These are like cozy sci-fi. So the first book in this series is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and we follow a mishmash crew of different people of all different alien species, some human, some not, and they are the crew of a kind of intergalactic mining operation. Their job is to sort of punch tunnels through space-time. It's a very interesting and kind of wacky concept, but it really works. And you just follow this crew as they get this really big job. It's very like found family, kind of lower stakes, and you just kind of explore this like beautiful world that Becky Chambers has created. And then I believe in the next books then you follow characters who are kind of linked to this core crew but not necessarily the crew themselves. In the second book, A Closed and Common Orbit, you follow the AI navigator of the mining ship, and then in this one I believe we're following the family of the captain. So I don't really know what this is about other than it's related to Captain Ashby's family, but I really love this series. It's so wholesome, it is so heartwarming, it is so life affirming. It's one of those that really makes you feel like grateful to be alive and experiencing things in this crazy world. I've really loved both of the books that I've read in this series so far, and I'd like to carry on and get to Record of a Spaceborn Few. The next book that I would really like to pick up this winter is the beginning of a duology, and that is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. And this is another sci-fi, but I think this is like a sci-fi romance that revolves around a kind of arranged marriage between 2 political factions in space. Something about sci-fi to me just feels very wintry. It just feels like the perfect time to read sci-fi is winter. So, and this one is literally called Winter's Orbit, so I think that is fitting. I believe that there is some kind of political assassination that occurs, and then an arranged marriage is kind of formed out of the tensions that arise due to this assassination, and there's a lot of like political intrigue and mounting hostilities between factions, and this just sounds like a really interesting and good time. I read a sci-fi romance earlier this year, The Mars House by Natasha Pulley, which I thought was fantastic and so creative. It was such an inventive and expansive world that Natasha Pulley built, and so I'm really excited to delve into that genre a little bit more and see more of like a cross section between sci-fi and romance. And then the final book in my stack is kind of representative of a niche in a genre as a whole, and that is Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. And this is kind of standing in for just Christmas romances generally. I am a bit of a Grinchy person. I don't really love Christmas. I find the whole time of year is quite stressful and overwhelming, and it's not really my thing. So I thought, wouldn't it be really funny to make myself read a bunch of Christmas romances? So my plan is to try and read a bunch of different Christmas romances in the lead up to Christmas this year and see if I can get myself in a bit more of a Christmassy spirit. This is just one example of Christmas romances that I have got my eye on this year. I particularly want to pick this one up as I read First Time Caller by B.K. Borison earlier this year, and I just loved that romance so much. I don't tend to read a lot of straight romance, but that one was pretty special, and I would highly recommend. This one sounds like it's got a bit of a fantasy element to it, in that there is a character who is a ghost of Christmas past, and he is assigned to a human this winter season, and he can't work out why, and they kind of have to work together to figure out what's going on with this assignment, and then over the course of doing so, fall in love. And I really enjoyed B.K. Borison's writing in First Time Caller. I'm really excited to carry on with that series when the next book is released in 2026, but in the meantime, I'm going to pick up Good Spirits, hopefully, and get a little bit more B.K. Borison in my life, as well as some other Christmas romances that I have got on my radar at the moment, but I won't go into every single one. Just know that there may be a little bit of Christmassy reading coming in the near future from me. So that's just a little overview of the kind of things that are on my radar right now that I'm really leaning towards picking up and are high up on my priorities list for the next few months. Have you read any of these books? Let me know if you have in the comments, or if there's anything in this stack that you're intrigued by and would like to pick up in this coming winter. If you liked the video, leave me a like, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and until then, stay safe and happy reading.